Good afternoon. I'm Professor Barbara Purifoy Selden. November is an election time, and the time is there to determine the composition of Congress. It is our duty to know the most critical issues facing the United States. Our meeting today is to have a discussion with Dr. Vinep Nana Asante Kankam-da-Costa about United States political, economic, and social issues based on his book, Who is Fit to Rule America in the 21st Century and Beyond.
Hello, my name is William Nagy Jr. I have earned a Master of Arts degree in education. I am a physical education and health instructor at a strict discipline academy in Detroit, Michigan. Dr. Nana, as voters, we want to be well informed. So what is the most pressing economic problem facing the United States of America today?
The most pressing economic problem facing the United States today that can linger on to the future is the huge national debt. The United States, the wealthiest nation in the world, has the largest debt in the history of a superpower. In 2014, it is estimated that the debt is around $17 trillion. If this trend continues over a long period of time, Americans' future will be disastrous, because the debt rate increases in the geometrical number patterns, like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024. But the revenue base of the government that creates surplus to pay the debt increases in arithmetical number patterns, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So by the time the revenue base reaches 10, the debt increases up to 1,024. So if you increase it by 1 to 11, it also doubles. Therefore, the earlier we find a concrete solution to solve this problem, the better it will be for every American in the future. Huge national debt is really a disaster to America, and people don't even know. It's not going to be pretty in the future if American government is broke and is financially impotent. Assuming there is a hurricane, like Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, that type of destruction, if it happens, where are we going to get help, if not the federal government? Assuming there is a heavy snowfall that has created potholes all over the major freeways in America, who has to face them, if not the United States government?
Thank you.
And a large national debt is an economic cancer that can permeate into all aspects of life. It can ruin the social structural foundation of the society. It can destroy the unique institutions, traditions, and establishment. It can make life uncertain and ultimately hopeless. At times, it can create dialectical opinions over simple issues that can lead to wanton destruction of human life. In critical times, critical decisions are made, and some of the decisions are very hasty. And as a result, with a hasty decision, imagine we wake up today and the government says it can no longer continue the Social Security. And you take your money and put it in a private investment, and the company breaks down. You have lost your entire life savings. So, in view of this, if the government today says that you can no longer continue Medicaid, what will our seniors do? We shall see the misery of old age and the misery of disability. And as a result, we have to look at this financial debt has to be taken care of. It's assuming that the federal government is declared bankrupt, like the way Detroit has been declared bankrupt, and people are demonstrating over pension. And guess what? They are demonstrating over common water of unpaid bills. And you just imagine living in a civilized world and your water has been shut down for 10 to 29 days. How will you smell? These are some of the issues in which huge national debt can create, because at critical times, critical decisions are always made.
Dr. Vinep Nana, my name is Yolanda. I want to know what is the history behind the United States debt creation, because it used to be a debt-free nation. Who and what has contributed to this astronomical debt?
The debt creation in America, according to your question, who and what? First of all, the debt has been created by wars that are not supported by the taxpayers' money. Two, it has also been caused by governmental policies that are geared towards sectional interests. And your question is, America has been a debt-free nation. America has not been a debt-free nation throughout history. We have a period in which debt was created with payment plan, and then at a time in which debt was created without payment plan. And I will explain that. Taking it from Kimberly Amedio's article, the Revolutionary War created $21.5 million. By 1791, the debt increased to $75 million. And the War of 1812 also increased it further. But the leaders tried as much as possible to pay the debt. So by 1835, American debt was completely paid off. The reckless policy of Andrew Jackson, the first Democratic president of America, refused to reestablish the National Bank of America. When it happened, he took the entire federal money from the bank and put it in state banks because he believed in state rights. Then also, he asked every American to pay land with gold. That created economic panic, and it led to economic depression. So by 1860, our debt has increased again to $65 million. At the same time, the Civil War occurred. And with the Civil War, the debt increased to $2.7 billion. But an attempt was made to pay. So by the Gilded Age of 1890, the debt was reduced to $1.5 million. By the end of the century, the debt went up to $2 billion. Then President Teddy Roosevelt, the last progressive leader of the Republican Party, and President Taft, the first ultra-conservative leader of the Republican Party, increased the debt to $3 billion, which was handed over to Woodrow Wilson, the first progressive leader of the Democratic Party. Woodrow Wilson would have been able to pay off the debt, but unfortunately, at that time, the First World War occurred. With the First World War, the debt increased to $27 billion. But when peace was restored, he set up a good economic environment, and he was able to reduce the debt to $24 billion. After him, because the economy was good, President Harding reduced it President Coolidge reduced it. By the time of President Hoover, the debt have come down to $16 billion. But then, in the 1920s, often known as the Roaring 20s, the economy was good. But the Republicans' hands-off approach, government do nothing, do little, did not regulate anything, allow business to do whatever they want to grab profit. As a result, it led to the Great Depression. With the Great Depression, the debt increased to $72 billion. So while Roosevelt was dealing with the Depression, the Second World War also occurred. And with the Second World War, the debt increased to $259 billion. Thereafter him, President Truman added a little, Eisenhower added a little, and Kennedy and Johnson also added a little. The next stage of our debt that went up too high was caused by President Nixon. President Nixon's reckless foreign policy in the Middle East led to the oil cartel company to restrict oil production. And as a result, there was oil shortage in America and around the globe, which led to great inflation. With inflation before Nixon was getting out of office, the debt has increased to $444 billion. And then with President Ford, who came out with a program, whip inflation, but he couldn't whip inflation. By the time he left office, the debt has increased to $699 billion. Then came President Carter. President Carter's time, the Federal Reserve Bank thought that the inflation was caused by monetary inflation. So as a result of that, the Federal increased the interest rate to about 20%. And by the time of Carter's rule, the debt had increased to $998 billion. Here then after came President Reagan, the most promising Republican leader. President Reagan, the most charismatic leader, hopeful for every American that the problem will be solved. Therefore, Reagan, who was more charismatic, taking 3 Republican leaders, is counted as one of them. If you take 5 presidents of America, he is considered as one of them. So there was hope in Reagan. But guess what? His Reaganomics tax cut policy led an unprecedented debt of $2.8 trillion. So Reagan alone added $1.8 trillion to the existing debt. Then came President George H.W. Bush. He also followed his predecessor. And as a result, the debt increased to $444 trillion, $4.4 trillion. Here comes President Clinton. We all have hope in President Clinton, but he also added $1.39 trillion to the debt. So the debt he left was $5.8 trillion. Then came President George W. Bush, the Texas governor, more hopeful, enthusiastic, conservative par excellence, ready to help America. He was to correct every mistake of the father and of Reagan to move America forward. But unfortunately, he moved Reaganomics tax policy to the zenith. And as a result, he moved America into 2-front war. This situation led also an unprecedented debt of $11.6 trillion. This is the debt that Obama inherited. Obama inherited $11.6 trillion. In addition to that, he inherited 2 front wars. In addition to that, he inherited a bad economy. In addition to that, he also inherited a critical situation in which he has to do with all this situation. So our debt has been created by wars and government policies that are geared towards sectional interest. Now let's look at this table. Table 1 on debt creation. If we look at 100 years between 1909 to 2009, we will exclude Obama's one because he's still in office. So between 1909 to 2009, of the debt of $11.6 trillion, the Republicans have created 464% of the debt, and the Democrats have created 1,874% of the debt. So in this way, who is for big government and who is a big spender? From percentage-wise, we will say that Democrats are for big government and are big spenders. Then let us look at the real numbers. If we look at the real numbers, for 100 years, Republicans have created $9.4 trillion, and the Democrats have created $2 trillion. So looking at it from real money terms, who is for the big government and who is the big spender? So these numbers are there not as a way of campaigning for any political party, but it is shown up for people to pick it up and see how best we can solve this debt creation. I'm sounding this debt creation to you because it is like Woodrow Wilson, who stressed to every American that if we were not going to be part of the League of Nations, we should prepare our children for a near future war. People thought his ideas were remote, but he knew that the Versailles Treaty could be misused by European power. So if America were not to be part of the League of Nations, it was going to be disastrous. And people didn't take him serious. So when Hitler came, he promised the Germans to take them back to 1871 greatness. With the 1871 greatness, he came out with strategies. Nobody questioned his strategies, and his strategies made war inevitable. And the war did come. So Wilson's drumbeat came true. That's why I'm also emphasizing to you about this huge national debt that has been created over a long period of time. Assuming there are examples of national debt that created troubles in the future. The French Revolution was caused by an unsuccessful attempt to pay a huge national debt. The king commissioned the Minister of Finance to find ways and means to solve this problem. The minister attempted everything in the book, but wasn't successful. In the long run, he called upon the State General to solve the problem. The State General had not met for 300 years. At the meeting, the first and the second estates, who were the nobles and the wealthiest people in the society, refused to reason with the government, as well as the third estate. on how to levy reasonable taxes to pay the huge debt. But the Third Estate also saw that their own people pay taxes. But at that critical time, people were having difficulty in getting ordinary bread. In view of this, the Third Estate revolted and led to the Great Revolution in France. But what happened in this revolution? Many important personalities were guillotined, and France went into an era of terror. Out of this came Napoleon Bonaparte, the child of the revolution. And by the time Napoleon got out from office, France lost Haiti and eventually lost their possession in North America, the entire Mississippi Basin that we always refer to as Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon sold a land of 826,000 square miles for only $15 million. Another nation that faced critical economic problem or financial crisis was Great Britain after the French and Indian War. Great Britain was broke. They wanted to find ways and means to pay their debt. Then what happened? They targeted Americans to be the source of getting the money to pay the debt. And when they did, American ordinary folks saw that they had to pay the debt of Britain. So they supported their leaders and revolted against Britain, which led to the American Revolution. Therefore, Britain lost the entire 13 states of America. And that's why this debt creation is becoming astronomical, and it has to be taken care of.
Dr. Vinep Nana, is there any leader or group that had reduced the U.S. national debt by creating a budget surplus?
Talking about budget surplus, which is debt reduction, we're going to take it also from a 100-year period, the way the debt has been calculated on a 100-year period. Now, on the surplus side, President Woodrow Wilson created $3 billion surplus. President Harding created $2 billion surplus. President Coolidge created $6 billion surplus. And President Hoover also created $1 billion surplus. Then President Truman created $19 billion surplus. And President Eisenhower created $2 billion surplus. After that, is there anyone that cared about reducing the debt? Nobody, until President Clinton. Clinton increased the tax rate. And Newt Gingrich was also in Congress reducing expenditure. So there was bipartisan approach to solve the problem. So they were able to balance the budget. In 1998, there was $69 billion surplus. In 1999, there was $123 billion surplus. And the year 2000, there was $230 billion. So in all, they were able to create $432 billion. That was unprecedented in American history. But then, after that, nobody had ever, or nobody had a reduction plan, or nobody had a plan in paying the debt that we are creating. So looking at it from a 100-year period, the Republicans have created $13 billion surplus. And the Democrats have also created $456 billion surplus. And now let's see. Is there any fiscal responsibility in Washington? Is there any accounting system in Washington? If this is the increase in surplus, how can you pay the debt we have created? Now the debt is about $17 trillion. Assuming we want Republicans to pay our debt, so there will be no debt creation. We set everything to zero, and every 100 years, let them create the $13 billion. That's how much they can create. Set everything to zero, and how long will it take them to pay our debt? That would take 140,000 years to pay the present debt. Assuming the Democrats also can be considered to pay the debt, how long will it take them to pay the debt? If every 100 years they can create $456 billion, that will also take them 4,000 years before they can pay the debt. But brothers and sisters, Jesus Christ has come 2,000 years ago. And within that 2,000 years ago, so many things have happened. So are we going to sit down and wait for 4,000 years for our debt to be paid? That is very serious. Even if we add Republicans' surplus to the Democrats' surplus, it will still take 4,000 years to pay the debt. But somebody will say, why not we go the Clintons' way? But we have to know, despite Clinton's surplus, he also left a debt of $1.39 trillion. How did it happen? Even though he created a surplus, there was too much money flowing into the Social Security Fund. So the government has the ability to borrow from itself and spend it. That is what we call the intra-governmental holdings. And so during his time, the surplus went to pay the public debt, but the intra-governmental holdings went up, so higher than the debt creation. And so if we want the Democrats to pay the debt, we have to set intra-governmental holdings to zero. And we have to go by Clinton's plan. We set intra-governmental holdings to zero, and everything to zero, so there will be no debt creation. Then with the Clinton's plans, all things being equal, it will still take 40 to 50 years to pay the debt, which means we are going to starve ourselves to pay the debt. And that is the situation we are facing. And so can we authentically say that, looking at these numbers, can we ask, is there any fiscal responsibility in Washington or any accounting system in Washington? This is serious. And this is what we are living for our future generation to come and pay. It's going to be critical. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Oh.